The Brazilian Formula One star warned that changes governing the cars this season were making the sport too dangerous. A few hours later, he was dead.
Senna was in his usual position in the lead when his car failed to take a bend and hit the wall. Impact was at over 310 kilometres an hour. As medical staff tried to treat him, the massive extent of his injuries became apparent. The race was stopped. Senna's pit crew waited for news. Doctors tried to stabilise his condition so he could be airlifted to hospital. 4 hours later, he died. The race was restarted, but for the winner, the victory will be hollow unless Senna's death can be given some meaning.
I hope we learn from this. I think there is a lot to learn from, and we have to use this. And things like this, they shouldn't happen without taking the experience from it.
The experience of the weekend indicates that Formula One racing has suddenly become much more dangerous. For 12 years, no matter how spectacular the crash, like this one in practice for the San Marino Grand Prix, the drivers nearly always seem to walk away. But the very next day, Roland Ratzenberger's death ended the 12-year run, prompting Senna himself to warn that changes to the rules are a mistake that could cause serious accidents. The new rules ban electronic aids that help handling road holding and braking, but modern circuits may now be too fast for drivers to handle without them. While safety's debated, there's no argument about Senna's greatness. He was single-minded about winning, and so assertive he was disqualified 5 years ago for competing too aggressively against his teammate Alain Prost. At home in Brazil, his success, when footballers were no longer world beaters, made him a hero. And today he's mourned by millions. He was one of only 7 drivers to win the World Championship 3 times, and this year in the Williams team as the best driver with the best car, he could have become champion again for a 4th time. Max Hayden, 3 National News.
Derek Young will have more on Ayrton Senna later in the programme in 3 National Sport.
Ayrton Senna's death in a high-speed crash highlighted the horrendous risks involved, and not just because he's a 3-time former world champion. It's because it was a tragedy some had been predicting since the start of a season in which the rules were changed to make things tougher on the drivers. Senna left the Imola circuit at the notorious Tamburello corner, hitting the crash barrier at an estimated 300 kilometres an hour and showering the track with debris. The real fallout, though, is yet to come when the sport begins its investigation into how a man regarded as perhaps the greatest driver of his time could so inexplicably lose control and with it his life. Senna was the first Formula One driver in almost 12 years to die from injuries received in a Grand Prix. But the assumption that the sport was somehow becoming safer was just another victim of a bleak weekend in which 2 drivers died. The rules of Formula One racing were changed this year by those who felt the sport was becoming less a test of driving skill than it was of technology. In some sort of tragic irony, Ayrton Senna had only today warned of the dangers which within hours would claim his life. In a newspaper article which appeared on the morning of the race, he had written that changes to the rules of Formula One had made his car more difficult to control. In trying to make Grand Prix racing an equal test of drivers' abilities, the sport had made 2 major changes. They banned active suspension, which keeps the cars closer to the ground on bumpy surfaces, and they also outlawed traction control, which assists the distribution of power between the wheels and the track. But even before the season began, Senna's teammate was expressing his concerns.
Without traction control, that makes it more difficult, easier to make a mistake. Certainly in the wet, it'll be a lot more difficult to drive.
So how could Senna, on a clear day and at the peak of his abilities, so dramatically lose control of a car which has no technological rival?
Some of the tracks that have been designed in the last 15 to 20 years have been designed, in fact, in my opinion, with far too high cornering speeds. And when a racing car, the dynamics of an accident at those speeds, in excess of 180 to 200 odd miles an hour, are very difficult to control and contain.
The key to the tragedy will no doubt lie somewhere amid the twisted wreckage of car number 2. But already an inquisition has begun, and it seems a sport which relies so heavily on technology for its safety may have, by reducing the former, sacrificed a little of both.
A failure of some sort, a mechanical failure, a problem with the mechanics of the car, a problem with the tyre, all of these kind of things, possibly something on the road surface, oil or whatever, all of these things could play a part.
Well, the legends of motorsport who once lined up to beat Ayrton Senna were today lining up to honour him. Nigel Mansell and Alain Prost, just two of the former world champions with whom Senna tangled during an often controversial career, spoke only of their distress at his death today. And though few would deny he was sometimes driven too much by temperament, no one could ignore his ability. In a Formula One career spanning 11 years, he started from pole position 65 times, almost double that of the next best driver. He went on to take 41 checkered flags, 10 short of Alain Prost's all-time record, but 11 more than Mansell. And the jewels in the Brazilian crown, 3 world championships in 1988, 1990 and 1991.
The debris had barely been cleared from the track, but some of motorsport's biggest names and best-known voices were finding the words to farewell another champion.
I remember Ayrton Senna, and it seems terrible to have to use those words, as a tremendously intense man who was determined to achieve his goals. You can't speak about many drivers in the same breath as you can Ayrton Senna.
Another who remembers the brilliant Brazilian is New Zealander Ian Patton, who was the chief mechanic for the West Surrey racing team when Senna was still driving Formula 3s.
It's probably a bit silly to say, but at that point he had the mentality of either being world champion or killing himself.
It would be 11 years before Patton's prediction would come tragically true on an Imola track which had already claimed one life and which would later provide Michael Schumacher with the most hollow victory of his career. Senna's career began to take off in 1985 with his breakthrough victory in the Portuguese Grand Prix. In 1988 he joined McLaren, and on the way to the first of his 3 world championships would win 8 Grand Prix in that year. But controversy seemed to follow in his slipstream. He's been banned for punching a fellow driver, and once in consecutive Japanese Grand Prix he shunted arch-rival Alain Prost off the track, later admitting he'd done it deliberately. This year he changed teams again to Williams, and at last he would be the best driver with the fastest car. Prost's record seemed to be at his mercy.
I'm under no illusions that's going to be an easy thing, because it's going to take a lot of effort to get used with a new machine and new people and a new team of team members, and I'm ready to start the work.
Ayrton Senna was 34.
2 drivers, former world champion Ayrton Senna and Roland Ratzenberger, died in separate accidents, which has left motorsport in a state of shock. There's now official talk of regulating speeds to reduce the frightening risks of Formula One.
At Williams' Didcot factory gate today, tributes to the driver widely acknowledged as the best of his time. As deeply as he was respected and will be missed, the grief in Brazil is more profound. The government has declared an official 3-day period of mourning. Senna was the country's #1 popular hero. The national sense of loss is overwhelming. Frank Williams, the company chairman, arrived in the early afternoon. Deeply shocked, he was unable to comment personally, but issued a statement.
His loss is impossible to quantify. Everyone who has ever met him in whatever capacity feels they have lost someone very special.
Still no answers, only questions about the cause of the accident, which happened at almost 200 miles an hour, with Senna apparently powerless to control the car. No clues so far of driver or mechanical failure.
There's no conceivable connection between the accident he had and the regulations. And the fact that the cars are difficult to drive, Grand Prix cars are supposed to be difficult to drive. If you make them easy to drive, all that happens is people drive them faster and the accidents are bigger. We spend our lives trying to slow the cars down. The engineers spend their lives trying to speed them up.
Thousands of tearful fans lined the streets of Bologna, where a gravely injured Senna had been brought on Sunday night and where he died several hours later. The flag-draped coffin, which also includes several of the Brazilians' personal effects, had 2 escorts to the airport. One, the official motorcade, and the other, the unofficial thousands who queued for a final glimpse of a motorsport legend. The Air Force jet left Bologna for Paris, from where the coffin, accompanied by a Senna family friend, caught a connecting flight to Brazil. His body will lie in state for 2 days until his funeral on Friday. Senna was farewelled in Sao Paulo with all the pageantry and ceremony generally reserved for heads of state. And among the pallbearers was Prost, the man with whom the Brazilian had shared one of the sport's ugliest feuds.
An estimated 200,000 paid their last respects in Sao Paulo to Ayrton Senna. Outside the city's legislative assembly, a queue some 4 miles long. Inside, grief and bitterness. Senna's family is now considering legal action against the Formula One authorities for not abandoning the San Marino Grand Prix. They say that organisers knew the driver was dead and told them so soon after the accident. The International Automobile Federation absolutely denies this, claiming a misunderstanding. The Brazilian government accorded full military honours as Senna's body, under a shower of petals, was taken to the funeral. Just as yesterday, the city was at a standstill. Public buildings closed, shops empty. And then, at the cemetery, stars past and present of the Formula One circuit accompanied the coffin. Alain Prost, Gerhard Berger and Jackie Stewart amongst them. They'd known Senna not only for his talent, but also for his ruthlessness. Today, though, there was simply sorrow and respect. The military ceremonial continued right to the moment of burial itself. Only Brazilian presidents had ever been honoured in this way before.
Former world motor racing champion Ayrton Senna. 4 days out from the start of the trial into the Senna death, photographic evidence has been produced suggesting the fatal crash may have been caused by debris on the San Marino track. 3 years down the track and the world still waits to find out who or what killed Ayrton Senna. The Brazilian superstar died after his Williams Renault hit the wall at Imola in the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix. Italian prosecutors have charged Williams chief Frank Williams, 2 of his senior team members and 2 race officials with manslaughter. This follows an investigation which alleged that the crash came after a faulty weld on the car's steering column had snapped. But new photographic evidence has made a timely appearance in a British newspaper showing debris probably from a damaged Benetton car on the track just ahead of the Senna Williams. The suggestion being that Senna may have swerved to try and avoid it and lost control of his car, hitting the Tamburello wall at over 300 kilometres an hour. The photographic evidence may be presented by the Williams team in its defence, complicating one of the most drawn-out and emotional issues in the history of motorsport. I don't think we'll ever know the real answer, John.
I think you're right, Tony. Thank you very much.